Let's do it.
Cool. Well, welcome to our session, Seeing Through the Hype, Finding Alignment with Your Technology Partners. Today, we're going to be trying to give you some tools for evaluating and selecting technologies and folks to help you with technology, to help enable startup founders to make good decisions early and make appropriate decisions as their company grows over time.
Totally.
Andy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Andy Rahn. I'm the engineering manager at Modern Logic. I've been in software development for over 23 years now. Most of my career I spent working for large corporate organization, Adobe, where I built a number of desktop software products such as Adobe Photoshop Lightroom and also some mobile apps there. And for the last 7 years, though, I've been at Modern Logic building apps, a lot of them for startups. It's really exciting to work with new companies, get a chance every couple of months to have a new client with a new vision, new business idea, and to work with them to translate that idea into the technology that empowers them. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Love being here. Can't wait to work with more startups in the future. Brandon?
Absolutely. My name is Brandon Johnson. I'm one of our leads at Modern Logic as well. Um, I have been in software for the better part of a decade, about the last third of which with Modern Logic. And uh, like Andy, my focus has really been on helping early stage companies get their product off the ground, make good decisions early, and then also just help solve a large variety of problems for founders and for small companies. Generally, those problems tend to be pretty abstract, and so a lot of what we do is working together with founders to um, merge domain expertise and also technical expertise. Um, in my free time, I also help to run the JavaScript meetup in town, helped out with some other meetups as well. But that's enough about me. Let's get into a little bit more about what we're trying to do here. There are a lot of questions that face entrepreneurs and startup founders, and there's also a lot of people competing for your attention, uh, people and technologies. So there might be some questions in your head around what tools to pick, what teams to pick, what does it mean to build software correctly? What does it mean to do it right? And then over time, you'll find yourself asking different questions as your company matures, as your needs change, as your customers change, and as your team changes itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've both been in this industry for a number of years and have seen a lot of startups come and honestly go. And I know for myself, I'm tired of seeing these vulnerable young companies that have limited budget making what I view as inappropriate technology decisions appropriate to their stage of growth. And so what we're going to try to do today is just give you an idea of what is appropriate, and you can apply that to wherever your company is at in terms of its growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the first questions startup founders might find themselves asking is, what tool should we use to build this? And there's a whole litany of other questions that fall out from that, right? One of the first ones you might find after that is this something that our users are going to use? Is this something that's going to be the core of the business, the product we're selling? Or is it something that enables the core of the business to do its work more efficiently? Does it support the day-to-day operations? Another question you might find yourself asking is this a wheelhouse technology? Is this something that your internal team or an external partner knows well? Are they familiar with it? Are they capable in the technology? And do they have deployed software to back up that experience? Every technology has trade-offs. So it's important to pick something where the selected technology allows you to focus on the main differentiator, the thing you want to accomplish. Because making decisions that allow you to focus on just what you need to accomplish in order to satisfy your customers' needs can help you leave the rest of those decisions to a platform, especially in the early stage, where lots of service providers can provide something pretty close to what meets your needs without a lot of extensive custom development, configuration, decisions that really put a lot of responsibility on yourself as a
Right,
startup founder.
exactly. And along with that is, even if those solutions you find aren't perfect, early in a product or company's life cycle, there's going to be a lot of changes. Even startups that had a crystal clear vision early on, I've seen make pretty dramatic pivots as they grow. If you've invested in a ton of technology that is specific to your initial business idea, you just now added an additional expense you have to incur to move those things in the new direction. Whereas if you're able to pick things that are more off the shelf, those are general purpose solutions that will support you even as your business is finding its way. And save that really custom technical stuff for when your company's a little bit more mature.
Absolutely. So one of the things I mentioned on the last slide was the difference between a core technology and an operational support technology. A core technology benefits from a dedicated, experienced team that has a lot of long track record in a particular stack. And that stack should be something selected to meet your needs, with a mix of emerging and standard technologies that allow you to pick emerging technologies when you're building your differentiating product, but pick standard technologies for those less essential parts, like Andy said, where if you tried to do them custom too early on, you might find yourself, chasing the Mad Hatter for a good long while, right? By picking standard technologies for those, they help you move quickly and be assured of stability in those products that you don't really want to be responsible for in the early stages.
Right. And when we say stack, depending on how technical you are, but any application, whether it's for a mobile phone or a website that has a lot of features, it's built on myriad technologies. And we call that collection of technologies a stack. And when you're picking a stack, again, it goes with what stage your business is at. But there are a lot of kind of canned solutions that you can employ, which might be easier to build. Gives you fewer decisions to pick. Also, solutions like that, and I'm thinking of say Amazon's web services, Amplify, for example. It solves some of the decision making for you because it comes bundled with that stuff. You do have to watch out, and it's going to be really hard as a founder if you're not particularly technical. But sometimes you're bringing on board, say, a CTO to your company to help you make these decisions. I've definitely seen times where technical people coming into a new organization want to change things up just for the sake of change. Some of that is human nature. You just can't help it. You want to make your mark. And so the tendency is to say everything that came before is garbage and I know better. But also there's a tendency to say, oh, I've always wanted to try Rust or Go or something because I've heard great things about it, but I've never actually done it. And so their tendency will be just to kind of say, no, don't use these boring things. They'll be obsolete soon. This is the brand new thing I want. But that isn't necessarily in the business's best interest. Honestly, I think, Brandon, you even had a story about a code base you ran into once that had this exact problem.
Totally. I think, like you said, it's just human nature, but I think it can bring a lot of risk to an early stage startup. I'm thinking of one situation that I recall where I was taking over for somebody else who had managed the back end of a relatively young company. But throughout their tenure as the developer on the back-end systems, they had taken over the Node.js project. Then over time, they wanted to make improvements and started a couple of different full re-implementations of the original code base. So it started in Node, and then they were like, well, what if I tried it in Golang? And they implemented some of the functionality in Golang and started moving the company to use that.
That's crazy.
Only to stop before they could fully move off of the original code base and move to Go. And then they picked another platform after that too. And so there were like 3 different production level systems that all were supposed to expose the same API, supposed to, serve the same purpose, but they all had to be running in production because different parts of the company were depending on different services.
It'd be like starting 3 homes by hiring a concrete contractor to dig you a foundation. And that's
exactly.
great. You have 3 foundations,
but your bedrooms in another. Yeah.
But you don't have a complete house anywhere.
Yep.
Yeah. And it does make sense if you need 3 homes to dig 3 foundations. But when you're a small company, which this company was not very big yet, it just seemed like kind of a tragic waste of resources to have done that.
Yeah, it's really easy to spread yourself too thin, but by keeping an eye out for those pitfalls, you can ensure that you're making good decisions about where you're spending those resources for sure. So the other kind of major type of software system that we've been discussing is what I'm calling enabling or operational technologies. And these are things that support the way your business works. Think more like QuickBooks or Excel, and think less like, a custom API or a custom mobile app. That's more like the prior slide. And when I've mentioned QuickBooks as a good example because it's something off the shelf that a lot of companies rely on. That is, backed by a huge company, and so many companies use it because it's available off the shelf, and it allows a lot of flexibility before you even start running into edge cases that require custom development. The nice thing
Right.
about systems like that are off the shelf is that you have a lot of opportunities for custom integrations that extend without replacing it. So you don't have to reinvent the accounting wheel, for example.
Oh yeah, that's very common. And it's not just, QuickBooks. Almost every major application out there often has what they call an SDK, which is a software development kit, which means you can either hire experts in that particular product or just developers writ large that are able to go in and extend the functionality of that. Be it like WordPress, you can add plugins to, Shopify, all of these systems can be extended. So those are good starting points for startups because there's a growth opportunity. Sure, maybe way down the road, you might want to ditch that altogether and go fully custom. But these SDK integration points are a great way for a small company to grow.
Right on. So now that we've defined some of these terms, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the 3 stages of startup growth that we're going to cover.
Yeah,
So
I'll take it from here.
yeah, you
Basically,
got it.
there are 3 phases of growth we're going to talk about: early, growing, and mature. And what it means to do it right is a little bit different for each of these stages. So when you're in an early stage business, you really need to prioritize proving out your business ideas before you invest too much in technology. You're going to need to allow for experimentation. This will allow you to find out and optimize your business offering so you can differentiate from your competition. You also want to try to avoid the lock-in that an investment in too much technology early might, as a side effect, do to you. Because, like I said, you're going to need to pivot often. And I really encourage people to think minimal about their technology to the point where you might not even use technology. For example, if you want to find out if an app idea will have traction with your customers, print out the designs on paper, go to a coffee shop, meet people who are you think your potential customer, and just show them those ideas on paper. Get them to interact with that and tell you what their response is. Are they able to understand that? Do they see value? You might be able to do several phases of iteration without ever hiring a developer just by doing that idea. Another thing you can do is there's a lot of platforms for out there called low code or no code solutions. The nice thing about these is they're systems that allow someone who's not too technical to start to put together pieces of an application workflow, from like user signs up to having onboarding, basic data entry, and some kind of processes that might involve sending emails or those sorts of things. They're basically today's equivalent of like a spreadsheet, or if you're old enough, you might remember the early Macintosh had a program called HyperCard. It's that kind of system. You can click, drag and drop, put together your application idea. It's something one person can do, and you don't have to be a super technologist to do it. Now, you may not build your business on that forever, and we'll get to that. But early stage business, the critical thing is to find out what your business needs to do to succeed, not to invest all that money in technology.
Absolutely. And it might be kind of difficult to define those right things early, which is why it's so important to reach for things like paper prototyping and even in some cases low code solutions, because early on, when you're trying to figure out what your company is going to be in the long term, you might take just about every customer that knocks on your door, because you need to find traction. It's hard to find your identity, though, when everyone who walks through your door is asking for something slightly different. And the more you grow, the harder it'll be to be everything to everyone. Um, as you as you grow, you might find that your customers coalesce around a different kind of need than you originally thought, and that can be a really special learning experience, because um, as you hone in on that need, you actually get more focus as a business, and that focus
Yeah.
can allow you to make different and more focused technical decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like a double win. So yeah, let's imagine now you're a growing company. You've managed to define that business. You have a little bit narrower focus in terms of what it will take to succeed. And in that growth process, you're starting to bump up against those limitations of those early technical decisions. So you might begin to explore how you can take the core fundamentals of your business and build them in a more robust fashion that will support you for, say, the next 5 years of growth. And some of these decisions will actually be longer term infrastructure. And so we want to maybe wean ourselves off of, manual workflows where employees are just texting customers directly, or you're using a spreadsheet for each of the core aspects of your business, or some of those low code solutions. Instead, we're going to be moving on to better, more robust infrastructure like Amazon Web Services, AWS, or Google Cloud, GCP. And they have essentially starter kits for building your backend. Amazon's is called Amplify. Google's is called Firebase. We tend to work with Amazon solutions. We're just more familiar with Amazon's technology. There's a lot of things we love about Amazon, so that's why we tend to recommend that to our customers. And the reason you want to switch to those is they're going to have higher availability. They can reach your customers no matter where they are in the globe. And they will make sure that your application scales well. What that means is even if you have thousands of customers using it simultaneously, it'll still be responsive and fast. And all the data will be flowing through happily. You're not going to see error screens or 400, 500 errors. Sure, these kits have limitations. And that's almost on purpose, because we want to keep your technology demands kind of in step with your company's growth. So there are trade-offs in AWS Amplify. Yeah, we all acknowledge that. But the nice thing is it gives you a foundation where you can gradually wean yourself off the decisions that Amazon made when they put together that kit, and start to customize pieces as you grow if you need to. They're good bones. They're good bones for building your business.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I think, like you said, the magic of these things is that you can reach for something like Amplify or Firebase, and use them as guardrails, right? You still get a little bit of that starter kit feel without being locked into the low code walled garden. You can start to take the data out of an Amplify data store and use it in another database if you want. I've worked on Firebase projects that will start with Cloud Firestore, and then as they grow or have more complex data science needs, move that over to BigQuery or to a SQL database, and run totally different relational queries on it versus something more document oriented like
Right.
Dynamo.
The other thing is these backends are able to support a variety of ways to interact with it. So if you want to build a mobile app, you can connect that to Amplify or Firebase. You want to have a rich website, you can connect it to even devices like Internet of Things can talk to it. And those front ends, say your mobile app, can be world class. If that's the differentiating thing that you discovered your business needs, it can be a full native app talking to that backend, or it could be a React Native app, which also is highly polished, efficient, runs great. And it'll be that still kind of middle level cost to build and support, because it's sort of like a kit. a lot of the things operate the same way. You don't need a dedicated team for each piece of the pie. Whereas in a large, enterprise deployment, you would have database specialists, you would have middleware specialists, you'd have API specialists, you'd have teams of people for each of those segments of your entire app structure. And even though you're a growing company, that's still out of budget for most growing companies.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, if you're successful at doing this well and you manage to keep your technology in lockstep with your growth and you become a mature business, say, with tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of ARR, then a lot of the decisions you made for that growing phase can be revisited. Even those off-the-shelf solutions like Amplify and Firebase will probably start to hold you back. And so you'll be replacing pieces of those with dedicated microservices, probably dedicated teams of developers to support each of those pieces as well. And we could probably go on for a long time about how exciting it is to build products that way, to have that kind of resources. But this is probably 10 years in your future. And, how much are you going to remember from the two of us that are 10 years ago in your past? I think the summary for me would be, don't worry that you're going to have to continue to invest in your technology as you grow. That's sort of on purpose. The plan is to not have your technology expenses exceed your capacity. And when you are a huge business, you'll be spending a lot of money on maintaining and growing that technology, but that's okay because you have the successful business revenue to pay for it, and it'll be worth it.
For sure. And I think one of the most poignant anecdotes that I can think of about this is I was working for a large company not too long ago where one of their core objectives as a business was to totally redefine their unit of work. So the way that their service providers provided their service to customers, and in doing so, that required a complete re-architecture of a lot of systems, a massive amount of cross-team collaboration, and some pretty significant changes to a lot of different code bases. Even the largest businesses find that this is something that is just part of life, part of the growth cycle. Sometimes those decisions are decisions that were made at the earliest days of the company, and it's not a failure in any stretch of the imagination to say, no, we've grown, things are different now. When you find yourself at this stage, you don't need to be afraid to question those assumptions, and you'll be ready to put in the investment to make your data model serve your business and your customers and not feel beholden to it.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that even big companies sometimes need to bring in outside help for this kind of transitional moment, because sometimes because you have all these little siloed teams, it's hard for any of them to see the big picture. So in that case, I think that's why we were involved in that project, which is just
absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the most valuable things that an outside resource can provide there is because they're not part of the overall management structure, you can move between teams, be a connector, and really start to get a full picture that otherwise people might feel like, that might not always feel accessible to internal teams. So I think that was part of what made that such an exciting engagement. So let's see. Oh, there we go. I just lost my slide controller here, which brings us to kind of the next phase of how do we get there. We talked a little bit about how each of those technology transitions happened, but I think one of the things we wanted to cover was, what does that look like in day-to-day operations of the business? You might find that in the earliest days, you might handle some things manually because people are in greater supply than funds to build technology, right? So for companies that start so small, they might handle support manually, going directly to the founder's inbox or early team members' inboxes. You might have people going into the database and managing account creation, account deletion. You might have all sorts of processes be manual. Another one would be content moderation, that might be manual too. But as your company grows, you might find that this becomes untenable, and you might have to start considering automating those processes once they start to become painful. And so replacing these with, oh, go ahead, Andy.
No, I was just gonna. It was just making me think of, a time that we had not really anticipated. The customer hadn't anticipated what would be involved in a certain kind of growth, and it was just a simple act of having a user profile where you can customize your profile image. But we hadn't anticipated, and I think maybe in this day and age you would, but at the time no one had thought, oh, what if people start uploading, inappropriate images? And so we had to kind of implement an 11th hour administrative feature so that you could review and ban users who were trying to basically poison the system by putting inappropriate images on their profile. Now,
yeah, for sure.
Of course, eventually, that's the kind of thing that you would eventually invest in automating, because early on, yes, it could just be a person clicking through, even though they might not want to look at that. But that's a different issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think it really becomes a question of, like, in the early stages, person hours to do manual work might be cheaper than spending developer hours automating system, because you might not know what you want to automate yet. But as you grow, you'll learn to get to know your customer and your users better. You'll have those workflows a little bit better defined, even if they're still run by people. And eventually you can translate some parts of that knowledge into something that can be automated, that'll handle, a lot of, 60-80% of the manual effort there. And you can really start to derive those benefits. You might not see them day one, but over time, you can develop an idea of each of those areas that could be better served by an automated solution.
Yep. Another question. Something occurred to me. There's a corollary to fully automated, which is, internal tooling, which facilitates workflows, is another form of growth that you might consider at some point, because you just find, like you were managing it through email or, some other mechanism, and just stuff was getting lost, or it was just too confusing. Sometimes companies will actually invest in internal tools to help with those processes.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're a team of one or a team of three, it might not be immediately clear what those solutions should be. But by the time you become a team of 10 or 15, or more than that, right? You might start to get ideas about what those things might be, and you'll probably be thinking about ways to automate that already. Another way that companies tend to grow is through rewriting and replacing existing systems. Andy and I have covered a couple different situations where that might happen throughout the growth cycle of a startup. One of those is because the technology kind of naturally pushes you towards that. As a company grows, sometimes the first code that was written might not scale to meet your company's needs, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. I know there's lots of kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around wholesale rewrites, and there's definitely lots of ways to undertake a reimplementation that can be problematic. But sometimes you do genuinely need to find a new approach, switch platforms. But the important thing to take away from this is that even minor rewrites do require a lot of care. But a lot of times there's very important business reasons why that might happen. Now, there are lots of things. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to interject. Sometimes it's not just that the technology is aging or it's no longer appropriate, but projects can accumulate what's called technical debt for a number of reasons. Because really software is sort of like a living thing. It needs tender, loving care to stay healthy. And so that you can bring in new developers to your project, you don't want it to be constructed in a way that there's tons of esoteric knowledge needed in order to make sense of it. Also, you need to have a healthy code base so that you can add features and fix bugs and feel safe about those changes. Honestly, I had a situation just this week where an unexpected feature uh, bug came into a thing and it was in a feature that was unrelated to anything we thought had been going on, and I, it was just one of those, one line of code was misplaced, and it had been missing for a year and a half, and it didn't really matter until this other thing in another part of the application changed, and that was what caused this new this buggy behavior to emerge. And that's just one simple example. But imagine if you had thousands or thousands of these like unexpected dependencies where a thing here would cause this thing over there. You couldn't make sense of it. And so a way to deal with that is to kind of continuously be doing improvement to the code base, small refactors, adding unit tests. All of that is together what we might call paying down technical debt. And it just helps the platform, the application be something that you can work on and carry you into the future successfully without having too many of these weird buggy surprises.
Absolutely, Andy. I think you covered a lot of the other cases here for why rewrites might happen if a business need changes, if a new team takes it over. And so I think, really the core of this is, working iteratively and taking care to create maintainable code is a big part of what early startups can do to help make their systems more maintainable. And working with a skill development partner can make that a lot easier as well.
Yeah, I guess one final thought on that.
Oh yeah,
you're ready to segue.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
But sometimes you don't keep up with technical debt, and you're like, oh my gosh, we have to rewrite this whole thing. It's so broken. And I just did want to say, I've seen people do that, and it is pretty much always more costly than one thinks. So as best you can, encouraging your development partners to do small incremental changes that gradually improve systems rather than the wholesale, we have to throw this all away. But, occasionally, I guess things do need to be written, but it should be done with caution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, maybe one of the other core points from this is that working iteratively, it will always treat you better than working in a longer term, say, oh yeah, it'll be done in 6 months fashion. It's way, it always serves you better to work in smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we are probably at the point now where we want to kind of wrap up and open the floor for questions. So if anybody has anything they'd like to ask Andy or I, you can hop over to the Q&A tab of your chat sidebar there, or you can just put stuff in chat too. We're pretty versatile. But to conclude here, we really hope we've left you with some information, some tools, and some lessons that you can use as founders or employees at early stage startups to help make decisions that are appropriate to your level of company growth. As we were saying, it's important to not make decisions that are necessarily one-way doors. By choosing a low-code solution or working with paper prototypes at the outset, you're making decisions that allow you to change quickly, and the cost of making a significant change is relatively low. Then as you grow, you can make decisions to choose technology partners that are capable and versatile, that allow you to pick reliable vendors without necessarily subjecting yourself to a lot of lock-in that might hamstring you as you grow further. Ultimately, you want to make decisions that support the core of what you want to do, your differentiating characteristics at every stage of growth. Ultimately,
like
by thinking about
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
we have a question.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh, that's okay. I just took a long breath there. But yeah, let's go for it. I think I see Jerry in the chat asking, if you were building a mobile app that is data heavy with photos and makes a lot of data calls, would you use Amplify or Firebase as the backend or something else? Andy, you want to take this one?
Well, I would say from experience, we've built applications like this on Amplify. And it works really well. The nice thing is Amazon Web Services includes a sort of, cloud-based storage system, kind of like a hard drive, in the internet, called S3. And S3 is one of the most robust and resilient, scalable, whatever you would want, ways to store data on the internet. And you can also connect functionality to S3 through something called Lambdas. And these are functions that can operate on your data in the cloud. So like a key thing for a photo-based system would be to create what we call image pyramids of those photos, so that you can rapidly load thumbnails of an original asset that might be many megapixels in size, but often a mobile app that's heavy with photos is going to have some kind of scrolling grid view that has a lot of little thumbnails. You don't want to be loading the original assets for that grid. It would be way too slow. So with Amazon Amplify, S3, and Lambda functions, and some of Amazon's built-in tooling, you can just sort of automatically create renditions of this pyramid, the 50 pixel square version, the 100 pixel square version, and so on, so that your mobile application can load downsized versions efficiently. Amazon has a ton of other tools for dealing with also video. If you wanted to support video in this app, you can transcode it to a mobile-friendly streaming version of the video, even if the original was not suitable for that. Also, again, we mentioned if there's a sharing component to your application, you might be concerned about nudity or violent imagery or something like that getting into your application. Amazon has built-in artificial intelligence that will scan for that and let your system know, so you can automatically flag them either for review by an administrator or just outright reject that kind of content so that it's not in the system. So I think hands down for me, I would go with.
I was going to say, can y'all tell that Andy has loads and loads of experience both building this kind of app and also in digital imaging in general. This is something that we love talking about because it's really our bread and butter at Modern Logic.
Absolutely, yeah. Now that you say that, I've probably built applications like this about 5 or 6 times by now. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great response too. Anybody else? Any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat.
Well, yeah. So put up our
the
emails.
Last slide.
So people come up with questions later, or if you're watching this as a recording, just feel free to reach out to us. I'd love to hear from you. I'm really a tech geek at heart, so I would even just talk to you about stuff, not as in a sales context, just because it's fun to talk to people about these things.
Absolutely. The other thing I'll throw out there is there is a QR code there. If you scan that QR code, I think that goes directly to our the feedback survey for the presentation. So definitely fill out our survey there if you have feedback for us. You can also, and then you said, drop either of us a message. And if you're curious about, we got a question in the chat that says on topic questions only. Probably.
Well, there's a question in the Q&A. I just see.
Oh, there is? Okay, let's do that first.
I'm currently using off-the-shelf software for multi-tenancy site creator to get an MVP going, but the experience is clunky. How do you get traction for a website going when the customer abandons?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really tough.
I would say that the first thing is to get some analytics in there to understand where are the pain points that people are abandoning you. So if there's a specific screen that's just taking too long and you see there's drop off on that screen, then you probably need to apply some technological elbow grease to figure out how to make that better. And off-the-shelf software, you might be constrained in what you can do, but you still might be able to do things to prep people if there's a delay with a little warning like, hey, hang in there, a screen that says this is going to take a second, or a loading animation, so trying to think creatively about how to get that to go faster. Often off-the-shelf solutions do have support things. You might be able to reach out to them and say, hey, why is this so slow? You know, if I were building it, you know, as a product myself where I had more control, I would start to think about, is there a way to do that slow process in the background so the user can continue, say, with an onboarding sequence? I just did this for one of our clients. Previously, at every step of the onboarding where you'd hit next, it would actually process the data in the cloud and come back. And so there was a loading spinner between each screen. And it got to be really annoying because it was like, click, wait, fill out the next screen, click, wait. And we just smoothed that so that the loading all happened at the end with a single spinner. And it just feels a lot easier. That's not strictly making it faster. It's not really a performance improvement. It's more of a psychological performance change. There might be things like that you can do with this off-the-shelf software.
That's a great point. Another thing I'd throw out there too is it might be worth evaluating whether it's time to move to a custom front end for it, if possible, because it seems like there's a lot of, you know, I think kind of implicit in that question is that, you know, the bones might be good, right? You might have a lot of data structure knowledge in the system that might be like the core of the business, right? But if the actual system that your customers are interacting with isn't quite living up to what you'd hoped or is no longer meeting your needs, it might be a good idea to explore what options you have to either build atop that with a different custom front end or see about exfiltrating that data to something that could allow you to get a little bit more control over the experience as well.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely look to see if this off-the-shelf system has an SDK or some kind of point of integration that would allow you to maybe build a little piece of custom user experience for those pain points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one other thing I wanted to throw out there briefly is that one of our colleagues, Chip, is giving a presentation at, I think it's 2:15, so just about half an hour here, about building an MVP versus an MEP. So before you know, that can help folks who are early on in the process and trying to decide what to build before you start, you know, thinking about what is appropriate to include in your first iteration of your business. I believe that's going to be streaming, and then for those of you that are live at Finnegan's right now, you can have hi Chip. I see you in the chat there. What was that, Andy?
Right, that's going to be in person at Finnegan's, I believe, and then later today I'll be back on stage there with Chip and Dustin as we're talking, and I can't remember the title of what our talk is on, but I think it's 5 points of 5 tips, I think, to help run your startup or something like that. So we have some anecdotes and good stories and ideas for you. And I think that's it, like 4, 5, something like that. 5 ways to de-risk product development. Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, and I think that's around 4 or something this afternoon, also in person at Finnegan's. And then after that, I don't know if people want to come down. We're going to have the fun event. So that'll be an amusing round of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, I would imagine that this is probably not the first time you've seen Andy or I or other folks from Modern Logic here at Startup Week, and I promise you it also won't be the last. So definitely check out some of our other talks. We've got lots of great perspectives on software for startups all throughout the event. So thanks everybody for coming out here, for participating in the chat. Lots of good questions. And as you can see, our email addresses are up there. We'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, great. This has been fun. And hopefully maybe see some of you later in person at Finnegan's. I'm heading there now.
Very nice. All right. Well, I'll let you go.
All right. Bye.